Okay, so we're going to conclude our discussion in Yom Kippur by looking at the Code of Jewish Law from the Alter Rebbe on the last topic, this has been our custom throughout learning the Gemara, which is related to halacha, to first look at the Gemara and then to look at the relevant section from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, from the Code of Jewish Law, so we get the full picture of both the Gemara and the practical halacha. So this is section 615 in part 1 of the Shulchan Aruch, laws related to, it's in the section, of course, of the laws related to Yom Kippur, and it's as follows. I'm reading in the Hebrew, you can follow along in the English. Siman Tafresh Tezvav, section 615. Din Tash Mishamita, the laws with respect to the prohibition against marital relations, B'Yom Kippurim on Yom Kippur, Beis Ifim, and it has 2 subsections. Aleph, number 1, Kvar we've already mentioned earlier in the laws of Yom Kippur. Sheyim Kippurim, the day of Yom Kippur, Asar B'Tash Hamita, one of the 5 things forbidden on Yom Kippur is marital relations, intimacy. Ulafisha, Liboy Shel Adam Gasim Ishtoi, because a man is naturally attracted to his wife, and it's very easy to engage with her. Not like you have to go find some woman somewhere. This is your wife, right? Hopefully you have a healthy relationship and you're able to be with her. So they have a double to be in proper relations. Therefore, it's therefore in Yom Kippur, one has to behave with her. All of the harchakas means the separations, the restrictions that apply when she is impure before she's gone to mikvah after her menstruation. So during then, there's a bunch of laws, like precautionary measures that husband and wife take so that their engagement with each other physically is somewhat distant, so as to remind them or to keep them away from falling into intimacy. Is husband and wife, they're naturally together and one thing progresses to the next. So they have to keep a certain barrier. And the relationship remains that during that time, verbal, emotional, and mental and soulful, but the physical, there are barriers made. So all those barriers that apply then should apply in Yom Kippur also. So that way he doesn't end up with his wife on Yom Kippur. Tahainu, this is to say, specifically, these are the main separations, even though there are more. Shala Yigaba, he shouldn't touch her. Touching her might lead to that. And certainly, needless to say, they should not share the same bed. Even if they're both wearing their clothing. She wearing hers, and he wearing his. Likewise, he shouldn't engage with her in excessive speech, meaning to say romantic speech. And likewise, all the restrictions mentioned in section 2 of the Shulchan Aruch, known as Yerodeya, section 195, where there it discusses the various different details of the restrictions taken between husband and wife when the woman, before his wife has gone to mikvah, and all those apply to Yom Kippur. And all of these things, and these restrictions should apply both during the day of Yom Kippur and the night of Yom Kippur. That is the night before. A law that's probably most important in all of this is the fact that one should have a light on in their room. A closet light or something like that. Okay. This is the law related directly to our discussion and the Gemara that we concluded with yesterday. One who sees, has a seminal emission at the night of Yom Kippur. A second. It's interesting that he adds the word nighttime. The Gemara didn't mention nighttime. I see there's a footnote here. Anyway. So one who has a seminal mission on the night of Yom Kippur, and as you can see, a footnote 4, section 613.19, which we actually learned, states that one might not immerse in the mikvah on Yom Kippur, even though the Gemara went through a whole back and forth about whether or not you should go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. That is only with regard to whether or not, that's only true if the law of Ezra were to be an actual law. The law of Ezra, which states that one cannot study Torah or pray unless one has gone, after having seminal emission, unless one has gone to mikvah. Ezra instituted that. So under that institution, it's a mitzvah to go to mikvah even on Yom Kippur before you get to the next prayer. So if one had a seminal emission the night of Yom Kippur, the next morning, inadvertently, let's say, and the next morning you would have to go to mikvah on Yom Kippur. But because, as I've mentioned, that law has been rescinded, just parentheses, the reason why it's rescinded is because the law is as follows. Whenever the sages enact a decree, they have to give it a certain amount of time. If I'm not mistaken, it's a year. They have to give it a certain amount of time. The Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses this. You have to give it a certain amount of time to see if the populace accepts that decree. And if the populace rejects it, it ends up being rescinded. And that's what happened with the law of Ezra. Many Jews have kept it anyway, but it doesn't have the mitzvah value enough to say that you should go to mikvah on Yom Kippur when ordinarily there's a prohibition against washing on Yom Kippur. So no mikvah, even though the Gemara has mentioned discussion about going to mikvah. Okay. So the person who sees it has a seminal mission not Yom Kippur, no mikvah. But he's got to go about his day the next day. He's still got to go to daven. He still has to do there's 4 more prayers to go. There's confessions, all kinds of things he has to do. More so, says the Alter Rebbe, quoting from the Gemara we learned yesterday, Yidag kol hashana, he should be nervous all year long. He should be concerned. Maybe this is the end of his year. Perhaps his fasting and his prayer is not being accepted on high. And therefore, they made him satisfied with like a sideshow. They made him get satisfied in some physical way, as if to say, yeah, your teshuvah isn't worth it. Go enjoy yourself. And God made that mission happen. That's actually a quote from Rashi, which we didn't learn yesterday, but it's there. And ke'eved, this is like a servant, who comes to serve his master a glass of water or some cup of something, of wine. And the master takes the cup of wine that you brought him and tips it over. So here you are presenting God with your fasting, and God says, this fasting, this teshuvah, out. Seminal mission for you. Mm-hmm.
Footnotes, and it was talking about how instead of pointing that, it's like throwing it back in the servant's face.
Yeah. That's usually the expression used, but Alter doesn't use that expression specifically. But it could be that that's what he means. Yeah. Specifically, it means a cup of water that is used to dilute the wine to make it drinkable. Our wine is already diluted when we buy it, but back in the day, you had fresh wine, raw wine, you had to dilute it to drink it. And al panav, he does it in his face, pours it back into his face. Kalemar is if to say, I have no interest in your service. Okay, so perhaps that's what it means. Now, if he lived out the year, he's guaranteed that he is worthy of the world to come. Why? Because certainly, this is the Gemara we mentioned yesterday also. Certainly, he has many merits, which protected him, and he will have a long life. Because this is the siman. If he sees seed, he lives long. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed, but the Alter Rebbe actually didn't take one opinion over the other. He combined the two. He said, you don't know what that seminal mission was. Maybe it's according to one opinion that says it's terrible. Maybe it's according to the other opinion that says it's great. When will you know? A year later. So, whereas the simple reading of the Gemara seems like it's a dispute, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's not. Maybe it's no good, and therefore be worried. Not certainty it's no good, but yidag, which is what the Gemara said. What the Gemara actually said, yidag, you should be worried. So the Alter Rebbe is learning that it's not a dispute. The Gemara is saying, be worried, because you don't know if it was good or no good. And then once you pass the year, you know it was great. Right? Now, yesterday when we learned the Gemara which said that if you live out the year, you know you're fine. I don't think the Gemara there mentioned this passage that if you see seed, it's a sign for long life. It did mention it?
That's the last line.
That was the last line. No, that was the last line for someone who lived out the year, right? Okay, so that's further to the proof of this is the right way of learning the Gemara, as not a dispute, but rather an uncertainty, either this way or that way.
The Marsha makes it remarkable initially when the Gemara says it's Durim. It said you make fun of the Durim against, not the Durim, the Math of the.
Yeah, that's what Rashi says that.
Right. And the Marsha asks the question, if you pass the year,
that's right. Exactly. Which is why Rashi doesn't say that if you lived out the year, it means you did teshuvah between last year and this year. No. Rashi says if you lived out the year, it means you have enough good merits. Meaning to say, you had enough good merits last year, and therefore the seminal emission wasn't bad. It was a positive sign. So the seminal emission that happens in Kippur isn't necessarily a bad thing. We don't know yet. It could be it's good, could be no good, and we'll find out next year. To see if we'll do teshuvah. So the Ein Yaakov would be different than the way we're learning in Rashi, the way Marshal without Rebbe's learning. Depending on your interpretation. Interesting. Right. But that's not the way Rashi learned the Gemara, and that's not the way the Marshal learned the Gemara, and that's not the way the Alter Rebbe learned the Gemara. It's interesting. The Alter Rebbe is learning it the way now we're seeing it in Rashi and the Marshal, that it's actually a question. We don't know where you're at. So this actually, by the way, now just dawned on me, this answers our question yesterday. It helps us understand why the Gemara concludes with this. Right? First, before I get to there, Robert sent me an email, which, by the way, I always appreciate when you get emails in the middle of the day. Someone's thinking about the Gemara. This is the best thing in the world. It means we're thinking about what we're learning. So you mentioned that it could be the Gemara is concluding with this to tell you that even something as terrible as that, God still forgives. God's still there with you and still can get forgiveness, right? Which is a very good insight. Now it just dawned on me another insight. And it's related also to something you wrote in your email. You're writing how a seminal emission is one of those few actions that require both the body and the soul. It requires full concentration. The full beingness of the person is invested in that act, which is why it's such a grave sin, and it's also such a great mitzvah. You've done on the right circumstance with the right intention, with one's wife, etc. So then that, and now combining to that with what we just understood here, that the Gemara is actually saying, not two different opinions, but we don't know where you're at. Either it's a very good thing or it's not a good thing. So the Gemara is maybe telling us that all of the potency of Yom Kippur, all of it, and all of the potency of your life, and this is the crucial message of Yom Kippur, the essential potency of your life is always a question. Good, no good. It can be the best thing, it can be the worst thing. That's the central message of Yom Kippur. It's up to you, exactly. It's up to you. How are you going to make that happen? And even the loftiness of Yom Kippur, the loftiness of Yom Kippur could be, God forbid, wasted, or the loftiness of Yom Kippur could be the highest heights, just like the seed of a mission. It could either be a blessing from Hashem or the worst possible sin. Right? So, yeah. And that's the essence of Yom Kippur, this choice. And it's specifically expressed in seed, because seed expresses the ultimate, my full investure in that action. Like the essence of my life, the potency of my life is in the seed, literally, because it produces another child. And your whole life is either this way or that way. And that's the essential message of Yom Kippur. This is dawned on me, perhaps, as we understood this Gemara like that.
This is talking about intentional or
Unintentional. If it's intentional, then it is a sin.
Yeah. So if it's talking about unintentional, then it's not really.
So.
Body and soul. I mean, it's unintentional.
Oh, so the Gemara says.
So it's definitely with the mind and definitely with that.
Yeah.
It's really a sin.
It's not. Oh, so it's not a sin. It's not a sin because it's unintentional. The question is, what's the message from heaven here? Is the message from heaven I'm doing great, or the message from heaven I'm doing terrible?
Because the reason he doesn't decide also is because in a year you'll know the answer.
Exactly.
So it's not like
exactly. And that's maybe another thing. Time will only tell if you're making the right choices or not. Your actions and but also time will tell. You have to work your best at making sure in the right direction. But I'm saying that the reason, barring what Rob wrote in his email, that a mission is an expression of your whole body and soul, I'm suggesting that maybe why is it that Hashem is sending you this message, which either goes this way or that way, specifically through seed? He could have sent you a message a different way. Why? Because seed represents the essence of your life. And God's sending you a message in the essence of your very life. It's either this way or that way. And everything can be split this way or that way on a dime. A mission on Yom Kippur, I mentioned.
Without thinking of it. Without thinking.
At night, nocturnal emission. At night. Especially if it's a young man. It's the way of young men. Either yes or either no. And even a dream could be a message from Hashem. If the person spent this whole day thinking about it, then obviously it's going to be on his own. It's going to be on his own fault. But if he didn't think about it all day, and it happened to him, because biology, the biology is such, by the way, that you produce a certain amount of. Your body produces an amount of seed, and your body has to release it. It either comes out through urine, or comes out through a nocturnal emission, or comes out through oneself. And if it came out as a nocturnal emission, because that's just the way the biology worked, and Punkt Hashem make that are happening on Yom Kippur, not last night, not the next night, then the message. And the message is either you're doing fantastic, or the message is you're doing terrible, you got to fix up. And this message is specifically sent, as you mentioned, in the seed, which is like the essence of one's life. Anyway, so this is interesting discussion.
There's a parallel more to this in Brothers than by anyone else. If someone's dream that life being let,
Yeah. It can either be negative or positive, yeah.
exactly. So the more it's the same thing.
So, but the Gemara says that your dreams are dependent on how you interpret them. If you interpret them positive, they become positive. If you interpret them negative, they become negative. Over here, it doesn't seem like, besides the Ein Yaakov, it doesn't seem like it's an interpretation over here. Over here, it's a question of what's the message, and you'll find out what the message is over time. Right, which is another thing, by the way. Don't be rushed to know what the message of Hashem is. Hashem sends a message. It can take a full year till you find out what the message was. You know, something happened to you. What's the message from Hashem? You're upset. Why did it happen? Calm down. Wait a while. Maybe you'll find out the message. Maybe you won't. Maybe you will. But it's not as if like it's a guarantee every time God sends you a message, that second you're going to get it. It could take time. Yeah, which is interesting. It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe adds the word nighttime. The Gemara didn't mention that. And there's a footnote here telling us to look at a certain responsa. So we have to look it up to see why it's there.
It's not often.
It's just more common than happens at nighttime.
No, it's just during the day, and most of it come out with your urine.
Right. In which case it wouldn't even have the same thing. But right. But over here it mentions Leil. I don't know why. He quotes he tells us to look at the certain responsa and look at the Beis Yosef. So we have to look it up to see why the nighttime is added here.
It's only going to happen in your deepest cycle of sleep. For people,
Yeah. Body has to be fully relaxed.
It has to be in the deepest cycle of sleep. If you're in the semi-consciousness, unless your mind has been thinking about it, and
it won't happen.
Which is a sin, then it's not going to happen.
Right. It's true. So it could be saying nighttime just because it's most common, or perhaps there's actually some deeper reading here. We have to look up that responsa to see.
What happens if the chazan gets it in the middle of the service?
That's an awkward situation.
Yeah,
That's really uncommon. Unless the person, then you should probably see a doctor. And you should probably see a doctor. If he's fully awake, his mind is focused on his prayer, and he's chazan, so he's singing, and he has an emission like that, he should probably see a doctor. It could happen to somebody, but that's a medical condition.
There is a thing. There's a case where you lose some. There's some like
You lose control of a certain part of your body.
certain part of your body, and it says joy. Just general the
Causes a release.
The general endorphins of joy will cause you to release.
So then that requires. As you're saying, so if that happens to a chazan, you should see a medical. The message from God is get checked out by a doctor.
Yeah, it probably has a condition.
That's what I would say.
It's this thing where like
Whatever that condition is, yeah.
It changes the whole theme.
Well, there's a whole thing in the Shulchan Aruch there about if you davening, pee or
Yeah. Actually, the truth is, by the way, we should have learned this halachas also, but the Gemara, the halacha also is, by the way, that on Erev Kippur, a person should refrain from eating certain foods that cause a person to increase his seed. So I think eggs, garlic, sorry?
Well, eggs. I thought it was
Eggs, garlic, dairy products. Wine, I don't remember. I remember for sure garlic. I'm quite sure eggs and dairy products. I remember. And heavy meat. Heavy meat, right? He should have chicken, lighter meat, rather than red meat, yeah. Or if he has red meat, he should have a little bit. A lot. Right. So there's a section of Shulchan Aruch about that as well. The Alter Rebbe advised on several occasions that the foregoing passage applies to pure-minded individuals, we mentioned that, of whom it would never be expected such thing to occur. Concerning a person of such stature, it can be said that since this fast was not accepted from heaven, he was granted satisfaction another way, as if to say, we don't want this. Another person should divert his attention from the matter entirely and be happy and glad of heart. In other words, if it happened as a result of your thoughts, then it's not a message from God. It's just you being you, and you got to fix yourself up that way. Letter suggesting how one should respond to such an occurrence. The Rebbe quotes the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, and also suggests that every day following Rosh Hashanah, one should recite chapters 103 and 104 of Tehillim and a chapter of Tanya. And that should be his atonement for what happened on Yom Kippur. Actually, the night of Yom Kippur, we actually say certain passages of Tehillim. I think it's chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I'm not mistaken. We say those chapters after it's in the Machzor, it's in the liturgy, And it's a prayer essentially to ask God to please not send any seminal missions tonight. Yeah, not exclusive to Alter Rebbe. Not an exclusive to the Alter Rebbe. Yeah. Chabad custom is actually to say the entire Tillim after Ma'ariv at night. Say the whole Tillim in show with the minyan, Kaddish, and all that.
What happens if a woman gets it?
Seminal mission, she doesn't produce semen. You mean? You mean, she has menstruation? No problem.
Not her menstruation. Women get.
Oh, that's not seed though. Not in the same way.
seed.
So yeah, if it happens, it doesn't. No comment. No comment because it's not.
They rarely even mention.
Yeah, because there's no wasted seed there.
They don't usually.
The whole wasted seed comes from the fact that it's potential life, whereas the potential what a woman releases during intimacy is not potential life. What she releases as potential life is her menstruation, which is not. It's built into her system by God, and it's nothing to do with positive or negative. It's just the way God made her. So a woman having that experience doesn't have the same thing. Right, that's what I'm saying. The essence of life is there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see potential life.
That's him.
Right.
Potential for great life, but maybe something exists that he doesn't get.
Right, the essence of life actually is in potential.
Sorry?
The essence of life is in potential. In other words, what the essence of life isn't living. The essence of life is the essence from which life comes. Like the potential of it. Yeah. 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 Okay, so great discussion. We're gonna stop over here, and I guess tomorrow we'll get to the Gemara related to Hanukkah. Yeah. Yeah.
To be very fruitful. If he doesn't control something, he become an adulterer.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing here, but this is also referring to a person by nature, a lot of vitality. Hashem is saying a great vitality, but you have to
Right.
be careful not to
Like the Gemara says about someone who's born in Maidim.
Exactly, same idea.
In other words, a person's born with a certain character trait, and it can either go positive or negative.
Exactly.
And if you're the kind of person who's full of passion, then that can either go good or no good. Be careful.
Exactly.
Well, that's
Interesting.
Since ASAP, that's what it's saying.
Since Asa has been that way, yeah. Yeah. Okay, wonderful day, everybody. Shakayach, very great discussion. All the